Our Vedanta philosophy tells us that we have to relate to our world in a practical way on the one hand. On the other, we have to have a background understanding of what the world is, and more importantly, what is, as it were, behind the world and flowing through it. So for convenience sake, we can divide this one substance, which is at the back of everything, as something that is, in a sense, at the back of everything. That means it's hidden from our normal kind of view. And yet it is fundamental. And it is real in the sense that it never changes. It remains as it is. And then on the other hand, we have to ask, if this is real, and we have to deal with the world in front of us, then how can we make such a mistake? And if it's not the reality in an absolute sense, then is it worth even bothering about? That's an extreme, which really is called laziness. So we have to sort a lot of these things out. Now, we can see that there is a kind of consensus of understanding with many thinking people. In Christianity, for example, we have Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas gives 5 ways to prove the existence of this unchanging substance. We can call it God if we like, but the word God for many people comes with some baggage, but we have to understand the English word God comes from the Germanic hut, which comes from Sanskrit hutam, the one that we feel is worth offering to. In other words, we present a high ideal of perfection. Man has a high ideal of perfection, aims to live up to that. That's the idea. So Thomas Aquinas tells us that the concept of change is in front of us. And we can clearly see that in order to register change, there must be something which doesn't change. So we can clearly see that some things in the world are even in the process of change. And this change must be the result of something else. Since a thing cannot change of itself. We can use an example. Supposing you see some animal in front of you and it suddenly changes into a completely different species. Then you would say, well, I'm an unchanging observer of that. Something else is changing, but there must be a cause for the changing. And the cause of the change itself cannot be a change. So since in the process of this transition or change, this development that we see, there must also be cause to change by something other than itself. What is that original cause? But that can go on ad infinitum. So clearly it has to stop somewhere. And clearly there must be something which is the cause of all change, but which itself doesn't undergo the change. And so this kind of language that is being used, we pick up also in the Kathopanishad. It puts it in a different way. Kathopanishad says that we are in a world like windows, like being in a house, seeing the outside. And what will we see? It says, Pranshi kani vyarnat swayambus tasmat param paschati nantaratman kaschit dira pradyak atmanam ekshad avrta chakshur amritatvam ichan. Now, what we call God, philosophy registers as the self. What do we mean the self? When you say myself, you're talking about the changing element. So when we say Atman, we're talking of a self that doesn't change. that is the cause of change. So the self is not to be sought through the senses. There's a big mistake that is made. If you want to find out what is your true self, you put it in a devotional context. What is God? Where is God? Don't look at it through the senses. Or don't try and find it. I often hear an argument from the atheists. You know, there's a common debate going on, atheists, theists, and so on and so forth. It's a little silly, but it's been going on forever. I mean, thousands of years. And so the atheist point of view is, I can't see God. There's no evidence for God. Means no objective evidence that I can see with the senses or observe or pick up with the senses. That would be absurd. And then if there was some entity that wrote, I am God, I'm here in the sky, then I might believe. Again, you're relying on the senses. But it's not to be sought through the senses. We can't look for it here or there. The self-caused, see the language. The self-caused, same thing with Thomas Aquinas. There is something which is self-caused. The self-caused pierce the openings of the senses outward. You can add as it were. How do we view the world? We can see some windows get opened, and then we see the world in front. Therefore, because of this, one looks outward. Now we can say pierced in a different sense. That is, arranged in such a way that we're looking toward the outside, toward the 5 objects that the senses pick up. Therefore, one looks outward and not within oneself. And that is our difficulty. We're continuously engaged in a world which is outside ourselves, or seems to be like that, and we take it extremely seriously. So that very often we react to it in an unplanned way, in an unthinking way, just a spontaneous knee-jerk reaction, and see it as a whole jungle of problems and difficulties, because we are not looking at what is behind everything. So why is it that we have an external world and we pick it up? Is because we have the senses, and the reason why we have the senses is they are somehow manifested from the one uncaused cause. But then, of course, it doesn't end there, because some wise person, however, not the normal kind of person, some wise person seeking what? Seeking life eternal. The problem with the outside world is it comes and goes, and this is another evidence from Thomas Aquinas. He says, things have a beginning, things have an end. So he goes the third way. We observe that things in the world come to be and pass away. But clearly, not everything can be like this. For then there would have been a time when nothing existed. But if that were true, then nothing could ever have come into being. Since something cannot come from nothing, therefore something must have always existed. And this is what people understand by God. You can see how close this is to the teachings of the Upanishad. So this leads to cosmological argument, and we may as well complete it. The first 2 are to do with causality, but the 4th evidence would be is a kind of version of a certain ontological argument that says that some things are exhibiting various degrees or varying degrees of quality. A thing may be more or less hot, or more or less good, or more or less noble. And so there are varying degrees of quality, and they must be caused by something that contains the most or perfect amount of that quality. Because just as the sun is the hottest thing, and thus is the cause of all other things being hot, so there must be some fully good thing, which makes all other things good. that which is most good is, of course, what we call God. Let's reflect on this. So when we register, even I, in a psychophysical way, exist, we are really saying there is existence. And from Descartes' point of view, if we're talking of philosophers, Western philosophers, is a cogito ergo sum. He says the one thing that we can be assured of, we can doubt everything, but the one thing we are sure of is our own existence. And as long as we are self-aware of that, that is, as I think, so I become, or I'm registering my existence because of my awareness of it, my consciousness of it, my recognition of it. Now, we may disagree with Descartes on many, many things, and I think I've told you how I disagree with his bifurcation, but on this, he's quite right. You can doubt anything of the senses. He doubted everything on the senses, since things can look different from different points of view. And so we cannot absolutely rely on the report that the senses are making. What is his point of view? But one is, I think, absolutely sure that we are existence and we are pure being. For this reason, we can never imagine our own demise. Last night we were talking of thinking of death in our case, because this is the great motivator. How do we get out of a stagnant condition? How do we restore faith? Well, please understand that your life is limited. Your current adventure will come to an end. Of course, in our system, we say it actually continues, but as it is now, exactly, it will be gone. The way you look will be gone, the assemblage of atoms will be gone, the aggregate of what we call body, and all of that will be gone. Family will be gone, bank account will be gone, everything will be gone. Now, we don't like to think of it, so we say, I'll deal with it later. We procrastinate on that issue. And one of the participants here says, you know, one of my most profound meditations is to meditate on this subject of death. Wonderful. When we do that, we may get a wake-up call, particularly as we advance toward the finishing line more and more and more. So death is a reality in our life. It's something that we have to face. And so, what are we looking for? We're looking for an eternal solution. So some wise person, says the Kathopanishad, however, seeking life eternal, as opposed to our temporary understanding of it, with his eyes turned inward, saw the self. We can only get this vision of God or this Atman, this self, by turning our eyes inward, by reversing the process. That means, therefore, that we have to re-register the senses, because the same Upanishad will tell us that the senses are like horses. They are means to an end in a sense, but they're also our inward senses. When you close the eyes, the inner eyes open, and when the attention is declutched from it completely, and the unconscious mind takes over, then we call this dreaming. We're using the internal senses. So it is yet not, that is, pierced, and the self-caused has so set up the openings that they open outwards and people look outwards into the appearance of things, but one rare soul in 1,000, in 1,000,000, seeking for eternal life, looking for spiritual wisdom, withdraws their attention from the world and turns their eye inward. That is where we find the truth, not in the external, but in the internal world. But then the question arises, if we spend all our time doing that, let us say in meditation, starting off with introspection and so on, how will we function? How will we go about our daily world, which requires the senses, which requires reaction to the world, we have to set up a preparation for this inward looking. When we sit for meditation, we are seeing ourselves within ourselves. But when we are living in our working, waking life, we are seeing the self in others. It's still inside and responding accordingly. So we can see that we generally lead outward lives, and to have a vision of truth, we must turn our gaze inward and look at things in a more profound way. We must bring about an inversion of the natural orientation of our consciousness and learn the habit of doing that, even for a certain section of our outward looking day. And people find it difficult to meditate often because there's this outward inward pull. There's this struggle between the activity of the outer world and the silence of the inner world. And this need not be a problem. As long as we create a division and say, the outward world cannot impinge on my internal peace. I draw a line, I leave it behind, but I use the material of the outward world as impressions, as memories, bring them out, and use them then to seek the innermost essence of something. And that means for most people, meditation is accompanied by an inward visualizing journey that is accompanied with a guiding script, canalizing our attention, our mind, toward the inner dimensions of our own self. So this we are seeking self-caused. So when we talk about self-caused, if we look at Neoplatonism, which tells us about Logos and all the rest of it, adopted by, again, Christianity, by John's Gospel, it's using it. It's called causa sui, self-caused, that which causes itself or produces itself, and it's different from the unproduced or the uncaused. So if we want to shift the language, we can say this is the creator God. It's not the uncaused Brahman, not like that. It is the creator God. And so when the eyes are turned inward, avrita chakshuha, we close our eyes to the phenomenal and turn them inward to the noumenal reality. This is the kind of language of Immanuel Kant. And then there's a beautiful poem by Coleridge that we can use. It were a vain endeavor, though I should gaze forever on that green light which lingers in the west. I may not hope from outward forms to win the passion and the life whose fountains are within. So the soul is like an eye, and when the eye rests on the perishing things of the world, it doesn't know the truth of things. And when it turns inward and rests on the truth, and it perceives the truth. The mind has this dual capacity to see the outward light and to see the inward light. So again, if we're talking of philosophers, Plato has this beautiful, beautiful scenario produced of people in a cave with a fire or a light behind them, casting shadows in front, and they don't see behind. They only see the shadows and assume that they are the shadows. And one brave person decides, I see there's a light at the end, let me go and investigate what that is. And then he sees things from a glorious different point of view. So most people are regarding the shadows as real. They have no notion of the objects to which they are due. And at last, as I say, it takes somebody who has a courage and an adventurous attitude, or somebody who's simply fed up with the impossible and unrewarding solutions being presented. and so succeeds in escaping from the cave to the light of the sun. And then that person will see real things. That person will become aware that he had hitherto been deceived by the shadows. We are living in a shadow universe. Now, this is all very well, but our experience doesn't say it. Our experience convinces us that the shadow world, let's call it, is the real world. And nature has a way of impinging on us, guiding us. That's why we call Mother Nature, guiding us through a series of pains and pleasures, joyful moments and sorrowful moments. But we have to learn from it. If we don't learn from it, then it seems we just carry on and on and on in the same kind of scenario where we get caught up with the shadows and not the reality. So the soul, if you like, when using the body as an instrument of perception, is then dragged by the body into the region of the changeable and wanders and is confused. And I think we can apply this word confusion to pretty much everyone. But when returning into themselves reflects, when it passes into the other world, the region of purity and eternity and immortality, then things shift and unchangeableness comes about. And that is like a relative of theirs. And we feel a sense of communion with that, a familiarity with that. And that is really sometimes called the peace that passes all the understanding. So in terms of meditation, and in terms of preparation, we have to have a discerning attitude. That is why when we talk about practice, we're talking about the application of discernment, discrimination, finding out that what is in front of us is in fact changing and changeable, and only because the senses are pierced openings that register things that change. And at some point or other, we have to do one of two things. Understand that we are the witness observing the changes, or we see something more valuable in what we are seeing. We see this first cause, this fundamental substance in every single thing. And for that we need examples. Now, the Bhagavad Gita gives us many, many examples through many chapters. We've brought it together in English. We call it the Divine Glories. And we're taking from the 7th chapter and so on, right up to the 10th, 11th chapters, because the purpose of making a list of all these divine glories is so that we can catch a glimpse. Whenever we look anywhere, we'll catch a glimpse and re-register things to the divine. Let's take the simplest example that we already mentioned in Plato's scenario, the wise man going and discovering the sun. The sun is something that we could easily take for granted. We wake up in the morning and the sun is there, seasons are there. And without these seasons, then the life as we know it, the agricultural life as we know it, doesn't really work properly. So nature has designed us to operate on a tilted axis called the Earth, and that takes its rotation around the sun and gives us a day and a night. And right now we have an enormous moon. The moon is quite close to us. And here in Ireland, you can see it, let's say 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. I saw it this morning. Beautiful, beautiful full moon, and so bright. And if we don't observe it, when the astronomers tell us, oh, the moon is really close, you should see it, then we're likely not to notice it at all. Or in the evening, we look out and see a painted sky of reds and pinks and oranges. And if we're not careful, we are absolutely completely out of recognition of it. We miss it completely. And the mind is being occupied with something else, something more entertaining. Now, when we take our attention to something that we enjoy, we can't really say we concentrate. When we look at a sky, we take the time to pause and see it, or see the moon, or contemplate the glory of the sun, its life-giving, our life-giving parent, as it were, or even see the life of a flower or an insect. The opportunities are all around us. And so we need to pay attention and pause a little bit in order to get an inner reward about it, where we stand in absolute wonder. Because really, even biologists don't really know exactly how photosynthesis works. There's a kind of a book, I think, The Secret Life of Plants. I haven't read it, but I've seen the title of it. And the title sounds intriguing because we don't notice the life of a plant in any great detail unless we're specialists in the area. And so we ignore a whole miraculous world. The world of the microcosm. This is a world in itself. It will give you an enormous surprise if you see these things, these microcosmic entities, about half a micron in width and 1 micron long, and moving about with great understanding of where it's going, what its teleology is, that is, what its purpose is. It's the last fifth evidence, as it were, from Thomas Aquinas, to say there's a teleology. There is obviously a purpose going on. And when something has a causal relationship, then we can see there's a sequence, and we see inevitably, we can pretty much guess that there must be some kind of objective, some kind of goal. Things are moving towards something. Now, the materialists will disagree. They'll say, no, things are just as they are, but we can't accept that. We can see that just through pure logic, pure philosophy, pure reasoning, and a feeling that we have that just as everything that has an objective also has a purpose and a function. Man's function, according to Thomas Aquinas, is to do with knowledge, to know, or it might not be him, it might be some other philosopher, maybe Aristotle, who believes that reasoning is really the forte of the human being. And using this reasoning, we can figure out where we are going and where we have come from. And then we have the capacity to experience it. Our inspiration is from all of those great saints of every culture and every religion that directly experienced this sublime substance, that went into a state of complete ecstasy, that went into the inner world and lost the outer world totally, or even just for a moment. And when you ask, and when you see on their faces, what did you experience? It was sheer bliss. It was absolutely different from the world that seems to pull us in so many different directions. 5 different directions, if you will. So to be careful about observing and appreciating the glory of everything, to the art of continuously bringing the attention, tuning it into the glory of the divine self. And it is this glory that gives us this joyful component in everything. And when we are depressed, or when we lack joy, or when we are stressed, the only reason is because our attention is directed toward the outer world of things, which change. And really, when you contemplate this question of death, it brings us to a position of reality, because it tells us that, let us say, in 50, 60 years, Most of us here will not be here to understand or appreciate what is going on. Somebody else will be living in your house. Maybe the language that you're familiar with may have changed. Certainly technology, based on the last 50 years, will have changed, will become much more advanced, and we won't recognize the world. We're having a discussion with somebody just the other day, a few days back, and said, already we can't understand. This is somebody who works in the IT and is familiar with current technology. We can't understand many of the things, drone technology, for example, and various things which are suddenly developing. And this is a person who has gadgets on their, at least one arm, maybe two, which puts them in touch with what is going outside their house, or email on your wrist, and all these things we have never dreamed of. Now, I know I'm a little bit archaic in years and in culture, but you see, we never had things like phones. This was a rarity. Some people had them, most people didn't. And cars, well, special people had cars, we ourselves never had. And the idea of carrying a phone around with you through radio technology, this was not in our minds at all. This might have been a science fiction thing. The fact that you can make a call and talk to the person face to face, that is, with an image, a video image, was unheard of. The idea of me talking to you as I am now, using this web, World Wide Web and so on, using all the sophisticated technology, which we do not understand. We understand the technology, it works, we can apply it, but actually the technology we are using is based on discoveries in the first quarter or so of the last century, and we just don't know how it works. We have no idea. We have some theories, but it's still an outstanding question. And I'm talking of the quantum world. Quantum theory is incomplete, and we have no idea. Richard Feynman says, we don't understand quantum physics. If you think somebody else had said, if you think you understand, you haven't understood. And it reminds us again of the Katha Upanishad, which says, if you think you know, you don't know. Or actually, sorry, it's the Kena Upanishad. If you think you know, you don't know. And if you say you don't know, you probably know. So these are some thoughts, picking up a passage from the Katha Upanishad and addressing what direction should we take. One thing we know is we have to change. Even if we think that we are applying spiritual life, if it is in any way static, it means that it's not applied fully, because it has to be applied to the point of discovery. And it is a work in progress for most people. You may have the grace where there's a flash coming from scripture, coming from teacher, coming from saints, coming from God. This grace is flowing and you may have this flash. But to sustain it, well, it requires effort from your part, because, you know, in order to go through something, you have to make an opening first. And we have to understand that, of course, if you take material life as something which is purely atomic, something that is inert, something that has no sentiency within it, and it moves, then there must be something that moves it. And I think it was a philosopher, no doubt, I think it was, maybe it was Aquinas again, I'm pretty sure it was, who says that if you see a moving stick, there must be a hand behind it. The interesting thing is, that we're all in the same pickle because, and we can see an exaggerated example of it, because animals, let's say a kitten, will see a moving stick but not register the hand that's behind it. It'll see it as a wriggling something that somehow is moving independently. It doesn't stop to inquire what is moving this thing. A kind of horizontal vision and a corresponding impulse to play with it or attack it. So we need to cultivate some things. We need to cultivate intelligence, wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is based on other people's traditions, that is, other people's experiences that come to us as traditions. We find this in scriptures or stories of saints, their lives. Non-delusion, we have to get out of that. We have to cultivate what is called forbearance. That is, we have to be strong and take the knocks and go through it anyway. We have to adhere to the truth as much as we possibly can. We have to cultivate sense control, control of the senses. We have to cultivate calmness, joy. We have to cultivate many things, fearlessness. We have to conquer these concerns of birth and death. We have to cultivate non-injury, equanimity of mind. Again, contentment, austerity, charity, fame, and all of these things we have to control. And so these are a list of things, starting here, buddhya jnanam asammoha, kshama satyam dama samaha, sukham dukkam bhavo bhavo, bhayam cha bhayam eva cha. This is the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which gives us a whole list of things that can be cultivated. And that chapter tells us about divine manifestations. It gives us many, many examples of how we can tune our attention into the glory of the self. So it tells, I am the source, says Krishna, standing from the position of word. I'm the source of the deities and the sages and so on. Now we have to understand that when a special wave comes along, which we call incarnation, and says I, they're standing in a position of cosmic mind. This is the great dilemma in theological Christianity. The Pope Francis made some statements on his visit to Singapore, which has created a whole controversy, seemingly. But you see, he's a person who sees the common sense of the contemporary world, but not only that, but also must feel it, feel the truth about it. And the Pope may as well have been talking as Vivekananda spoke at the Part of Religions. He's talking to a group of youths from different cultural backgrounds. And he's saying that all religions are paths toward God. Imagine. Now, the traditionalists have got very upset about this, and they say, no, John's Gospel says, I am the way, the truth, and the light, only through me. If you want to see the Father, it has to go through me. Not understanding that when a Christ is speaking, he's speaking from the position of a cosmic mind, of the Word that becomes flesh and dwells amongst us. And from that universal perspective, he's talking. Same thing with Krishna. He's doing the same thing. So he says, I am the source of all. Now, that statement alone is worth meditating on. I am the source of all. Not the source for cooking. That's something different. But I'm the origin, I'm the source. From me comes, I'm like the root that manifests as the tree. From me, all things evolve. There's a big puzzle in biology when we talk about so-called evolution in its various forms and various interpretations, that you see, where does this change come from that we observe in the biological life? Seeing that we have a single origin, yes, because I'm the source of all, says Krishna. So from me, all things evolve. When we see things evolving, changing, it has to remind us, surely, it's coming from the source. The wise know this. They adore me with all their heart. See, language is the same in every religion. With their minds fixed on me. How can we fix our mind on this God? Well, the mind will wander, no doubt. But the secret of fixing it is constantly bringing it back. Called Abhyasa Yoga, constant practice, until it's constantly dwelling and being fixed. Fixed means unwavering. With their life absorbed in me, enlightening each other and ever speaking of me, they remain, what? Contented and happy. What about what we call Buddhi Yoga? Tesham satat yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. To these who are ever devout and worship me with love, I give the yoga of understanding by which they come unto me. Don't worry, how will I do this? Where will I get this strength and all these gifts, divine gifts of concentration, attention, and so on? No, to those ever devout and worship me with love. That's it. Now, some people even struggle with that. Why should we love God? Because God is lovable, a free supplier of everything, unconditionally, with no reward or punishment in sight, not the theology of some religions, not that kind of God, but a continuous supply of divine grace flowing in your direction like a mother whose love is flowing constantly in a protective, loving, resourceful way. Purely out of compassion for these people, he's giving the assurance from cosmic mind, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy the darkness born of ignorance by the luminous lamp of knowledge. It gives us hope. All we have to do, therefore, is develop love. That's all we have to do. Love in a devoted, constant way. So, as a person who knows this, who gets an insight into this, will exhibit this, manifest this through speech, and Arjun does it because he says, in a kind of outpouring, if you like, of feeling, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Pavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adidevam Ajam Vivam. Arjun says, you are the Supreme Brahman. It's a beautiful prayer. The Supreme Abode, the Supreme Purifier, the Eternal Divine, Purusha, the primeval deity, unborn and omnipresent. It's not that God has to hear these things, but it's an outpouring from the devotee, a recognition. You are here, you are there, you are everywhere. And not only that, but all the sages, celestial sage, Narada and so on, they have all proclaimed it. Then he goes on, truly you alone know yourself by yourself. Otherwise you're inscrutable. And who are you? You are Purushottama, creator of beings, God of gods, ruler of the world. And then tell me more about your glories, he asks. How may I know you? By constant meditation. Constant meditation. How can we do that? Is it constantly sitting? No. Krishna is already exhorting Arjuna, please get up and fight. Be active, do your duty. But constant meditation means keeping the attention tuned in to the glory of the divine self or God, preferably as a chosen ideal, because most of us are practicing this bhakti yoga, this easy way of love. The easiest way is japam, lovingly repeating God's name. Anybody can do it. This is the wonderful, wonderful spiritual practice of the modern age. Now, I am the self, says Krishna, seated in the hearts of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and also the end of all beings. We could spend hours on this one passage meditating. Of all the Adityas, I am Vishnu. That is all the shining ones. There's not here, but yesterday, somebody called Aditi, the mother of all the Adityas, the shining things. I am Vishnu, that is the all-pervading thing. I am that one of luminaries. I am the radiant sun. I am the radiant sun. I'm not a separate thing that shines in the sky, a kind of lamp that hangs there. I'm actually the radiant sun. When I look at the sun, I'll see you. And so on like that. Of all the heavenly bodies, I am the moon. When we look at the moon, and we have an opportunity for many of you to see it, maybe in the early hours of the morning, when you see it, you recall this, I am the moon. Not I'm in the moon, I am the moon. When you look at that, it's God's face, looking back at you, smiling. And so it goes on. So we can use these ways of recalling things, of recalling these glories, and in doing that, what are we doing? We are recalling words. We are using words which are counter words to a struggling, confusing world that we have to deal with. And we deal with it through language. The internal mindset is expressed in words, a kind of monologue to yourself. That monologue can change. Lord, you are here. Lord, you are there. What a glory. As opposed to, this happened yesterday, what a pity. Or something is about to happen in the future, what a fearful thing. So these are just a few thoughts on possible questions that can be asked. And normally the question comes up, how can we, on the one hand, attend to our spiritual inner life, and on the other hand, attend to the world outside? We can look through the windows and see the glories of everything, the withinness of everything. And also that acts as a preparation for us to turn our eyes, our gaze inward. And it is only by turning the gaze inward will we get this direct contact, this deep, deep unity and union of connection that will leave us with a tremendous sense of radiating joy and that peace that passes all the understanding. So we have a few more minutes where we could ask some questions if you choose.
Swami, just one thing. I noticed today that how quickly I'm taken out of that state in a work environment where things suddenly get very stressful, and then you get caught up in that stress and you lose a period of time without that awareness that you're caught up in the stress. I suppose I just noticed that I can disappear and be consumed by that quite easily. And I think, gosh, how did I let that happen?
Yes. So you see, the art of tuning the attention into the glory of the self is really what we call karma yoga. In fact, we probably should call it karma bhakti, that we are doing all unit activities for love of God, returning the energy that is given to us, and dedicating all the unit activities in this present moment in a stress-free way. What is karma yoga? Karma yoga is doing all the activities without stress. That is, we do all the activities and the mind is in a state of calmness and equilibrium. Now, that takes some rehearsal, but we start off by assuring ourselves that the divine is with us. And so we have to learn to practice the divine presence all the time. We start our day off with doing that, a good, thorough, intensive, and joyful meditation in the morning. Meditation, prayer, and japa, these are the three things, components of a morning devotion. That acts as a kind of battery to carry us through, but no doubt we will suffer from forgetfulness because external activities will impinge on us and get us caught up in it. So we have to use a number of techniques. Constant japa, constant repetition of the mantra is a technique of keeping you close to the divine. Seeing that in all the situations, in people and places and events in the working environment. Secondly, taking all your activities as unit activities and dedicating them before and after the activity to God with an interval, a pause interval, following the pattern of the heart. The heart knows how to go on continuously, approximately a beat per minute, per second, I should say, because it acts as a peristaltic pump and pumps and rests, pumps and rests. So learn mental rest after every activity, no matter how short it is, small it is. And in that quiet moment, you are fully tuned into the glory of the divine self. And then go on with the next activity. Like that, you do it. Punctuate your day with pauses. The natural pause is before you eat. So if you're taking morning tea, there's a pause. If you're taking lunch, there's a pause. If you're taking afternoon coffee, there's a pause. If you're taking a supper, there's a pause. So that the eating or drinking is a kind of clue. It's a kind of indicated, oh, I have to actually offer this to the divine. And so in this way, you learn to do this work and prayer, labore, labore orari, that is work and pray. There's a formula of monastic life in the Benedictines, for example. They have that phrase. But you see, their day is no different. They're working and they're praying. And so whether you call it monastic life or not, we all can do this. We can work and pray collectively. We can do it. It requires changing our habit a little bit and adventurously starting something new every day. And at the end of every day, we review it. How did it do? How did I do? We give a report back to the Chief Executive Officer, the Divine, and the evening devotions will be this offering and a review. How did it go? Tomorrow I'll do better. All right.
Thank you, Swami.
All right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Nice to see you all. All right.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om